you literally are creating a place, a house or an office or a spa or a hotel it has so much steel around, in the floor, in the walls, in the ceiling. It's like a box made of steel.
How would cities change if architecture was designed for consciousness instead of efficiency?
It actually is very different in terms of electromagnetic fields and how healthy people will be or not if you place it in one area or in other areas.
The body cannot shut down fully, maybe shuts down 70% or 50%, because it's still trying to push away the stress of whatever. And so that causes slowly long-term diseases.
What do you actually see change first? Is it their nervous system, their energy levels, or their health symptoms?
Of course we know what causes cancer, and in every person it's a combination of things. It's emotional, it's spiritual, it's EMF, it's mobile phones, it's Wi-Fi, it's issues with your relationship and your family maybe, it's bad food, bad air, bad water, and there is a long list of that.
Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails, and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the Chembo comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the Chembo is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the Chembo and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon. What if your home is quietly destroying your health? What if the walls around you, the geometry, the materials, the very layout of the space are literally programming your nervous system without your knowledge? Most people never consider this, and that might be the most costly oversight of our time. Hello beautiful and amazing people. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave. Today's guests are Dr. Lydia León and Arturo Ponce de León, the founders of Geophilia, and two of the most compelling voices working at the intersection of psychogeometry, healing architecture, and human consciousness. Lydia holds a PhD in Geobiology, researching the direct effects of geophysical environments on the human biology, and has spent 15 years uncovering why ancient temples were built the way they were and what that means for how we live today. Arturo is a qualified architect and psychologist who has spent over 20 years teaching sacred geometry across universities, conferences, and seminars on multiple continents, and has designed and built over 112 projects worldwide that have put these principles into practice. Together, they are on a mission to bring back something our ancestors understood and we have almost entirely forgotten: that a building is not just a structure, it is either working for your health or against it. This conversation sits at the edge of everything we think we know about healing, consciousness, and the invisible forces shaping your everyday life. Pay attention, because once you hear this, you will never walk into a room the same way again.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You gotta be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, Arturo, welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very, very good. Thank you.
Yes. So I heard your interview on Matt LaCroix's channel, and I've followed him for many years. In fact, he's one of the reasons why I got into the stuff that I talk about with Anunnaki and our ancient hidden history and stuff, because he was mates with Gerard Clark and, Rex Beer and all those kind of people. So when I first started to wake up, I found those guys, and then I found him. And when I saw your interview with him, and I was very intrigued, because as I was telling you off camera, I have known that architecture plays an important part in our lives, but I didn't really conceptualize how much of a role it plays in terms of even shaping our biology, how we feel, and that kind of stuff. Because I used to be a former civil engineer, so I look at buildings completely differently from most people. I look at structures and stuff like that. And I used to have to deal with architects a lot. And we always used to say that architects like to design these things that sometimes aren't really buildable. And it's just fanciful, and we, the engineers, have to put it in place. So look at it from an engineering background and hearing the things that you were speaking about, it sparked my interest, because I was like, okay, this is quite interesting here. And I think that, my listeners would really be interested to hear the stuff that you and Lydia have to share. So we can speak to you first. And so we can start into your origin story, because there's always an origin story in all of these things. So you trained in architecture and psychology. What made you realize buildings were influencing consciousness?
Ooh, very good question, actually. I also studied telecommunications engineer. So all this world of satellites and computers, and I'm just fascinated since I was 15 years old, actually younger, when I was 7, 8 years old, I was fascinated, how can voice can come from a box? How can we see images from boxes? It was deep questions at that time. So to reply to your question is through sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is the link, or what it's also called fractal geometry or natural geometry, is the link that allow me to understand how the universe is the internal part and the external part are linked. So, if you read any esoteric book or any Eastern philosophy book, you will realize that they always say that we're all one, that we, the whole consciousness is one and that everything is one, etc. But they don't say how. They don't say, okay, how the outside and the inside actually are similar, or how can we, of course, we know that we influence the outside through our internal world, but how is that geometry? How is that linked? So that fascinated me the most, to understand how the internal and the external world are linked. And then what is the hidden or the invisible matrix or geometry that is linking both worlds, the internal and the external? And so these questions were always there. When I was 15 years old, I had a very ecstatic experience, like what they call a Kundalini experience. So that just blew my mind. I didn't understand absolutely anything that was happening at that time, but it gave me an experience, like literally, like a psychedelic experience without psychedelics.
Wow.
It just opened my consciousness in a way that I realized, okay, we are mainly energy. And these things that we feel as matter, when we touch things and when we can see objects, that they're all divided and they're isolated, actually they're all linked. So what I say in my experience is that I first jump, into the pool, and then I realize if there is water or not. So I will first jump and have the experience, and then I will try to understand, okay, what's the experience about? What happened? Or how is this actually happening? So from that experience, from that Kundalini experience, that I had the blessing to have like a guru or a teacher that, reading the books and reading the whole thing, I realized that it's something actually very common. And then because of a very good friend, a very old friend, he's also a physicist, Dan Winter, he was talking about Kundalini experiences from the electrical standpoint. So he was talking about Kundalini, the experience of having a Kundalini experience, as an electrician. So because I was already very interested in electricity, all the physics world, I realized like, wow, this may have a clue. So I went very deep into the rabbit hole. Dan Winter, studying a lot of his work and also studying the work of Nassim Haramein and Greg Braden, and at that time, Drunvalo Melchizedek. I was also studying a lot the work of Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, The Fourth Way. I was just devouring any book that I could find. At that time was not the time of social media, so some websites here and there, but mainly was books. So you actually had to, read the book. You couldn't use AI to give you a summary or something. You actually had to read the book. So I learned so much. And I realized that this passion that I had of trying to understand the internal and the external, the subjective and the objective world, I could link them through sacred geometry. Because sacred geometry, or this fractal geometry, which is what nature uses to create life, is what nature uses to express. The whole universe expresses through patterns and geometries that uses different proportions. Going very, very deep, I realized that, okay, psychology, that's why I studied psychology, because it's all the internal world. And then I studied architecture because it's, okay, all this geometry, how can we, put it into place? How can we build our things? And it's very interesting because we don't think that the vast majority of people, they don't think that the place that they're living actually affects them. They know, okay, if, maybe if it's very dark, it's not the best, but they don't think in terms of geometry. Like literally, if you live in a cube, or if you live in a pentagon, or if you live in an octagon, or if you will think different. You will feel things different. Your whole internal universe will be affected. And there has been many architects and engineers and researchers and physics that have been doing very deep studies about that, like how geometry affects us. how a simple geometry, like nothing complex, a simple geometry like a pyramid or an octagon or octahedron, like even more complex geometries, but simple geometries, how they can affect us. So that's why I've been dedicating my life, like over 30 years, to study that connection, to study the internal and the external connection. In very simple terms for your audience, imagine like you have organic food, that we all know that it's better, that it's more healthy, that it has more vitamins, more nutrients, etc. And then you have junk food, that we all know that it's just, like really bad in the long term. So the same concept applies to architecture. We have junk architecture that it's made with very bad materials that will off-gas, that will create like a Faraday cage, which is something not healthy for our body, which will isolate us from the electromagnetic field of the earth. And it's literally junk architecture versus something that we can call like biological or organic architecture, which is completely the opposite. It's made with natural materials. It's made with some types of geometries and proportions that imitates life and imitates the universe. And it will be made with choices, like conscious choices regarding colors, regarding height, width, depth. So we tend not to think about that architecture, the place that you are right now, like if you see, the walls that are surrounding you, the ceiling, the floor, depending on the materials and the proportions and the colors that they are made of, is how you will actually feel. It's a direct influence, far deeper than just the psychology of color or the, like a very superficial understanding of architecture. Literally, we have made that experiments. We have placed seeds, seeds for germination, inside an octagon or inside a cube or inside a dodecahedron or inside an icosahedron, different geometries and patterns. And we have seen how they, in the same place, in the same controlled environment, they germinate different.
Wow, that's amazing. Like, as a civil engineer, right, everything that you were saying just was making me think back to when it was on the building site and then when it was managing and supervising men. And I never had the concept or the understanding, because we would just, put up formwork, put in steel, pour concrete, next strip, put up formwork, put in steel, pour concrete. It was just rinse and repeat, And that's very interesting that even the colors as well make a difference to how you feel and all that kind of stuff. And you said that you had that experience that awoke you from 15. I mean, at 15, I was deep into sports. I was nowhere interested. I wasn't even into books. I only got into books in my late 30s. And now for me, if you give me a book, that's a great present. So that's totally amazing that you had that sort of like awakening from such a young age, So was there a moment where conventional architecture stopped making sense to you?
Since the beginning, something was not matching. It's like, okay, we're doing, like mainly industrial materials. We're using steel, we're using concrete, and when you go into any building that is made with industrial materials like concrete and steel, you will feel, if you have been for a long time living in nature, or if you're sensitive to electromagnetic fields, you will immediately feel it. Immediately. You'll feel like literally disconnects you. And this, you as an engineer, you will understand very good, and your audience, people that are listening to us, there is a concept that is called a Faraday cage. A Faraday cage, imagine, is like a box made of metal. And we use in telecommunications engineer when you want to test something without the influence of the environment. So for example, if you're testing a new Bluetooth device, how it's going to connect to another Bluetooth device, you don't want that it has any influence from the outside, so you put it in a Faraday cage, which will isolate it from the rest of any other signals. So the problem is that through using a lot of concrete and this mesh of steel, like in a building, or like almost all the houses nowadays are made like that, you create a Faraday cage. You literally are creating a place, a house or an office or a spa or a hotel it has so much steel around, in the floor, in the walls, in the ceiling. It's like a box made of steel. And that will isolate the natural flow of the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And this natural flow, it's called the Schumann resonance. And it's not, something esoteric or something, like that you have to believe in or something like that. It's just simple science. Anybody can measure it. It's not, you can just check online and with simple tools, you can measure the Schumann resonance. And the Schumann resonance exists all around the world. It fluctuates. And it's a cascade of frequencies. It's like different frequencies from 2 hertz, 3 hertz, up to 55, 60 hertz. So it's a cascade of frequencies. And it's very well known, the 7.83 hertz of the Schumann resonance. It's kind of, very well known. But imagine it's like a cascade of frequencies. There are many frequencies. So this flow, which is emitted by our beautiful planet, we need it. Our DNA needs it to literally be integrated with the planet. So when you isolate that for a long time by living in these Faraday cages all around the world, you ended up being isolated electromagnetically first, and then psychologically, and then physically. So what happens if you observe cities, these big cities that are all made of concrete, you can have millions of people around you and people feel isolated. They feel lonely. They feel not understood, even if they're surrounded by so many people. Why is that? Because electromagnetically, they're isolated. This Schumann resonance cannot go through your house and you cannot nourish from it. And then if you keep adding things, for example, in your house, you have Wi-Fi, you have routers, you have, maybe microwave, you have the fridge, you have an excess amount of other artificial electromagnetic fields. So what happens is that our DNA gets literally, it doesn't get the proper information, doesn't get the proper food, the electromagnetic food that we need to be healthy and be alive. And that's why it's so important, if you're living in a place like that, to go as much as you can to nature. Literally to, spend as much time as you can in nature, grounded, like barefoot, to be there in nature. If you live close to the sea or the ocean, that's the best. Like, you can just have a swim and you will literally ground. You, as an electrician, like in electricity, you need grounding. Well, we as humans, we also need grounding. So that's what happened with, like in simple terms, with sacred geometry and with all this electromagnetic understanding of our buildings.
I find that fascinating because, so I was born in Barbados, and I remember when I was a kid, most of the houses were made out of timber, right? And as the country started to grow and people started to make more money, we started to shift over to concrete, and block houses and stuff like that. And something for me, I always felt like if timber was a better material, because it is obviously a more natural material. So my question is then, is timber a better material to live in than concrete because it's more from the earth, it's more natural?
Absolutely. So what we do We've been doing this for over 50 projects. We've been building all around the world. We have been doing a lot of, like architectural projects and buildings. And there is no, let's say, black and white. Everything has to do with the context. But the best, let's say, if we have like from 0 to 10, the best will be to use everything natural materials. But it's true that in some parts of the world you have earthquakes, so you cannot use, if you want to do a 5-story building, you cannot use natural materials. So it depends on the context. And we have had all types of clients. Some of them that they say, I don't want to do more than 2 floors. I want to do everything natural materials. So you can use bamboo, you can use wood, you can use earth, you can use many things that and not use any industrialized material. But it's also true that you can combine them. So let's say you don't want to go to the 10, you want to go to the 7, 8, 6. What you can do is you make all the structure in concrete, let's say the columns and the beams, but not the walls, not the floor, and not the ceiling. So yes, you have the structure. In many countries around the world, they will actually not even give you the building permit if you don't use concrete. So you can use concrete, but avoiding the Faraday cage effect. So you have the columns, you have the beams, you have the whole structure, but you don't use concrete in your ceiling or in your roof or in your walls. So you can use natural materials like timber, you can use wood, you can use also bamboo, depending on where you are in our planet. And the walls, you can use natural walls. You can use hempcrete. It's an amazing material. It's like concrete, but it's natural. It's made of hemp. You can use the walls like that. They're excellent insulators. Excellent. They have a lot of properties, like very good properties. And for painting, you also have natural paints. So like that, you have, a solid, hard, very strong structure, but everything else is natural material. So you don't have the Faraday cage effect. And also you will not have off-gassing. You will not have all these problems that synthetic materials have, like they off-gas. They, even after 5-10 years, they keep expelling VOCs, like volatile or organic compounds, and they will keep off-gassing. They will keep creating like toxic materials. So we actually live in a house that it's made like that. Our house, we live off-grid, in the forest, and our house is made like that. The columns and the beams are made of concrete because we live in a seismic region, but everything else is natural materials. So it can be done. It's just the consciousness that has to change, and then everything else will follow. And also geometry, what geometry you are using, because if you think about the geometries that we live, it's mainly a box. Think about it. Everything, it's 90-degree angles. Everything is a square or a rectangle. So you go from a box, in your house, you take another box, your car to go somewhere. So you go from a Faraday cage box, your house is sleeping, to a car in another Faraday cage box made of steel or whatever material, but mainly metal. And then you go to your office, which is another Faraday cage box. You stay all day there, and then you come back and you repeat the same story. So it is like someone saying, I'm going to eat the same food every day for the rest of my life. There is absolutely no other geometry. So we have been pushing and, writing books and, making this type of podcast interviews to share this vision with people so they are aware that your house doesn't need to be another box. It can be something else. It can have other geometry. It can be, we do a very specialized study to see what's the best geometry for you to live, but you can just start resonating. Okay, what if I do a pentagon? What if I do an hexagon? Why did I do an octagon? What if I just break literally the box? Some people like more organic materials, like more organic forms, like spirals or things like that, which I know because we've been designing so many projects and clients. I know that it's far more difficult. It's true. When you try to solve the master plan of a spiral house, it's far more difficult, but it's also far more beautiful. So literally, we invite you guys to think about breaking the box. Like, everything is a box. And in terms of efficiency, it's true that it's the most efficient because you can, it's the best ratio of volume to like, let's say, the master plan. It's the best. But it's not the only. It's not the only. And if you see around, if you just observe nature, any tree, any animal, any plant, you will never find a straight line. There is no straight line.
This is very true. Very, very true. What you're saying fascinates me because as a kid, I have always fancied wooden houses because I remember my great aunt, she used to live in a wooden house. And I always found that wooden houses were a bit cooler. And even though like my house in Barbados is a wall house and, I've always lived in a wall house, there was always something about the especially here in Barbados, we have like a style of where you have green heart, which is a very, very hard wood from Guyana. And you varnish it and then you have the white sash windows. And that style had always appealed to me from a kid without even knowing that is just a better sort of like material for like resonance and for how you feel. Because I looked at it always practically where I always felt cooler in a wooden house than I would do in a concrete house, Mm-hmm. And for me, that was always like the main pull. And even though I am looking to build a house and, looking to get a green heart house, built in Guyana and sent into Barbados and stuff like that. So now hearing you saying what you're saying and sharing that, it makes me even more convinced that I'm doing the right thing because, and exactly what you said, I was going to say, do the base, the foundation of the concrete, build the columns, and the beams, the ring beam out of concrete and steel. And then I would just erect the side of the house and then just lift the roof in place, again, all timber and green heart. So now I'm even more convinced that is the right thing to do and go against the grain because I never liked doing what everyone else did. It never resonated with me. And I always was that guy that I would just do the opposite just because everyone else is doing it, just for being a rebel, So that's pretty cool. So how did your collaboration with Lydia deepen your understanding of human environments?
Well, with what happened is that I was working since I was, 15 years old with this Kundalini experience that I was very sensitive to the electromagnetic fields, all these fields, invisible fields. And then because of my background in engineer, I wanted to measure them. So I bought whatever type of devices and it's like, okay, let's measure how they actually impact or not. And a lot of testing and a lot of work measuring them. And then because of psychology and then architecture, etc., I had many companies. First one that I had was Psychogeometry. And it was how sacred geometry can affect us internally. So we're working a lot at that time, talking 25 years ago, we're working with doctors, with medical doctors to see how a simple geometric form can actually change your electromagnetic coherence in your heart or in your brain. And then, it was like another onion. So we had another company, Arca, and we were doing a similar concept, but for the external spaces. It's like how sacred geometry can affect the place that you're living. How if we change the geometry will actually change the way you feel. And then with Lydia, we had another layer, like an onion with another layer. We added another layer. She made her PhD in geophysics and geobiology. So we added another layer of, okay, the internal world, how it's affected, then the external world, and then how we can measure both of them. So how can we literally measure that the location of your house, you have a land, it actually is very different in terms of electromagnetic fields and how healthy people will be or not if you place it in one area or in other area. So that's even more mind-blowing, because it's like, okay, I don't know, I have 1,000 square meter land and I want to place my house. Where is the best place to put it? That's all her expertise, literally the location, how the location and how temples were located in specific areas to induce health, to induce, I mean, she will talk a lot about that, but that's how we linked, our path and our work, and we created Geophilia, and then with Geophilia we do many things, but we do a lot of research, we do a lot of projects, architectural projects, travels, trips, etc., regarding harmonics, regarding space harmonics. Like, we can find harmonics everywhere. Why don't we bring them to our house? Like now what you're saying, that you'll be building your house, it's like the best thing to do is to use natural materials that are close to your house. That's how it has been done for thousands of years. So if you don't have bamboo, don't use bamboo. But if you have earth, use earth or use timber. So you don't have to import it from, from very, very far. So you just use whatever you have available in your area.
Wow. So, I knew that these temples and pyramids and all these monoliths were placed in areas that, because of energy resonance and frequency and stuff like that, because it was almost like if those places were put there specifically for healing and stuff, and we've just forgotten about that. So since energy is like so important in all of that, how does spatial geometry influence emotional regulation and mental health?
That's a very good question. and that can take us, like many hours to decode. But in simple, very, very simple terms, is that imagine that we have 4 levels. Okay, so there are 4 levels of organization. So the first level, which is what we're mostly used to, is the biochemical level. The biochemical level where we can, touch things, and we have, this chemistry, our biochemical body. You can touch your body, that's biochemistry. And in terms of architecture, in terms of places or temples, whatever you see, you visit, you can see it, okay, this is made of stone and it's there. That's the first level. But then you have another level, which is more subtle, which is the electromagnetic level. So we have our physical body, but then we have an electromagnetic body that is radiated. And this is nothing fancy, it's nothing woo-woo. It's simple physics, like it has been documented, it has been photographed, like you can actually measure it very, very clearly. So we have our electromagnetic body, which is more subtle. Some people can see it, some people can feel it, and we have now machines that they can measure it. So the same thing is true for spaces. The same thing is true for temples or for houses. They have an electromagnetic field that it can be coherent or not. The same way, you have the biochemical level, it can be healthy or not. So temples were designed or were placed in that location. They were used to sacred geometry. They were designed in a certain way with certain materials to amplify the electromagnetic field of the earth, this Schumann resonance that I was talking at the beginning. So they were used to literally like a resonance cavity. They were used to amplify this electromagnetic field. And then you have the third level, which is the gravitational level. Imagine our physical body, we have our physical body, the electromagnetic body, and then we have a more subtle body, which is the gravitational body, which has the shape like a donut, has the shape like a toroidal field. The same is true for spaces, for temples. They also have a gravitational body or a gravitational field. Some of them have been actually measured. There are many books you can check online where they measure electromagnetic beams radiating from the top of the pyramid. Literally, like, you cannot see it. If you are there in the top and you're sensitive, you can feel something tingling around, like around your skin.
Wow.
But you can, and there has been, in what is called the Bosnian pyramids, and some people say it's not pyramids, it's a pyramid. Okay, doesn't matter if it's or not a pyramid, but you go in the top of that structure, and it has been measured by several university teams that in the top of that pyramid, there is a beam, like a vertical beam of electromagnetic energy. I think it's, if I remember correctly, 28,000 hertz. So how can this be possible?
Wow.
So the same thing is true for many pyramids, in the Mayas or in different cultures all around the world. There are thousands, millions of pyramids all around the world. And they emit something that is called a gravity diode. Like they literally emit through their tip electromagnetic and gravitational energy. And then the fourth level, that it's even more and more subtle, is this fractal world, the fractality. So fractality, imagine fractality in very simple terms, is when you have any geometry or absolutely anything, and the whole will be reproduced in every part. So you can check online fractals and you will see whatever amount of fractals. But fractality is the key that the universe developed to create more life. And it's also what we use, fractality is what we use in our designs, in the materials that we will pick. Natural materials are better than artificial or materials because they're more fractal. What does that mean? It means that they literally, when you see them in a microscope, you will see not, like the geometry stops. You will see more geometry inside over and over and over and over. That's crucial for life because through fractals is how life reproduces. Like imagine you have an apple. Inside the apple, you have the seed. Inside that seed, you have 1 million potential apples. That's a fractal. Inside everything in this universe, for example, inside any cell of your body, if I take one cell of your body, inside there is the DNA, I can take the DNA and I can reproduce you again. So in every part of you, there is all the information necessary to produce another Arturo, another Todd. So the same concept is true for using natural materials. They're more fractal. Whereas cement, for example, is less fractal, or artificial materials in construction are less fractal because they lose that fractality when they're heated up at extreme temperatures.
Okay, so you touched on this slightly early in the conversation. Why then do certain buildings create anxiety without us knowing why?
Very good question. I think sometimes literally people don't know what they're doing. They don't know how they're designing. They use sometimes very often cubes and rectangles and, like simple shapes without any fractality. They create this Faraday cage effect. They use all these synthetic artificial materials. And these, if you have a Faraday cage that the electromagnetic fields cannot escape and also the external cannot get in, and you put inside Wi-Fi, antennas, routers, like you put all this excess amount of electrosmog, you may not feel anything for 1 to 3 days, but if you're working 8 hours every day there, after 1 to 3 months, you will feel it. You will start feeling dizzy. You will not be very concentrated. You will feel anxious. You will feel like, and also if you add blue light, like this fluorescent blue light, all these things add up. You add VOC materials, you add many times in this closed building, in these closed systems, they have artificial air. They literally have circulating, air condition that is not taking natural air from the outside. So everything is artificial, nothing natural. So one day maybe no problem, but 3 months, 1 year, 3 years, every day in the same toxic environment, you will feel, even if you are not aware of it, but you will feel anxious, you will feel kind of disoriented, you will not think with clarity, you can burn out. Like I have seen so many people, this is actually something that it's very, in literature, it's very well defined, that is called the syndrome of the sick building. And it has many parameters, many parameters on how you can define a sick building. And of course, a sick building will lead the path for sick people.
You just brought back some memories, because I remember after I had my surgery in 2017, I was on crutches for 15 months, and I was in my room every single day, all day for 10 months straight. And now it makes so much sense, because the building was a concrete building. We had Wi-Fi in there. It was during winter, so my windows were closed all the time. There was no air circulating. So basically, I now understand now why I basically got depressed. It was not necessarily because of the surgery and everything. Well, maybe those were part of it, but the building could have contributed to the depression, because it is a Faraday cage with everything just building up, no air, Wi-Fi, not really going outside, concrete building, steel obviously is just more and more and more and more. And I thought I was losing my mind. So it now makes sense. Wow. Okay. So with that being said, what mistakes are most architects making when designing modern homes?
Yeah, it was not your depression. The environment amplify all the unhealthy emotions. So what are they doing? What are we doing as architects or as engineers? We are using too much artificial materials in all levels, even in the finishes. And we're using always the same box geometry. Those are the biggest problems. So we are creating these isolated boxes that make people sick in the medium long term, maybe not in the first 1-2 days, because they are usually looking for more profit. That's why they end up using all artificial materials, because it's all industrialized. It can be, at some point, even with robots, it can be made, very fast, very cheap. And it's the same concept of cheap food, like cheap junk food versus organic healthy food. We, of course, know that organic healthy food is more expensive, but it's better, tastes better. So the same thing with architecture. They're putting this idea of junk, cheap materials, that it's unhealthy architecture, versus natural, healthy materials, that it will be more expensive. Of course it will be, but it will be healthier in the long term. If you observe all around the world, all temples are made with, old temples and ancient temples, they're all made with natural materials, because of course there was no industry to make anything with concrete, etc. But even now, the best temples are still made all with natural materials. They're not made with concrete. And I think that's the biggest problem and the biggest mistake, that we are, as society, as a humanity, we're prioritizing mostly cheap, fast, unhealthy materials. Even I can give you the whole list. Like if you check in geophilia.org, we have a blog which we list all the best materials to use and the unhealthiest one. And if you think about plywood, it's full of cancerogenics. Like plywood, it's just pieces of wood, and then they have to use glues to put it together. High pressure, high temperature, they glue. But what they don't tell you is that these glues will keep off-gassing, will keep emitting vapors for 15 to 20 years. So imagine hospitals. Like now when I go to a hospital, it's like, my God, who's designing these hospitals? If you think in terms of health, now there are some hospitals that they have a little bit of more consciousness. We have been participating in some of them, but it's the minority. If you think about the big investments in hospitals, they're literally a recipe for the patients to not heal. Like no natural light, all artificial colors, all artificial, air, Faraday cage, no grounding anywhere. The food they give them is all sugar, with sugar and more sugar, if you analyze what they're giving. So it's literally everything surrounded by electro smog, like machines that are emitting and beeping. And so high level of stress. Of course, it's far more difficult for people to get healthy in an environment like that. The best will be if you observe, some ancient hospitals, they actually call them solariums. Every hospital have to have a big windows with natural light, with natural air coming in. People must be able to see nature from their window, some kind of nature, and they have to have something that is called a solarium, which was like a kind of a courtyard with natural sunlight, and they were there outside in the open air to receive sun, which is by definition the engine of life. So that's what we've been doing. We have to prioritize health instead of profit.
Basically, the way you described it is that we've been designing death cages for the last few years and not places to get healthy. Because I remember seeing a picture, I think it was from the 1920s, where they had a solarium where they had it was called or also known as an outpatient wing, where they would just bring all the patients and they'd be in their beds and they'd be lying down in their beds in the sun as part of maybe an hour a day or whatever, and then they ferry them back inside. And that definitely makes a big difference for healing, So let's switch gears and talk about conscious architecture. How do ancient temples reflect psychological and energetic intelligence?
That's a deep question. Ancient temples are fascinating devices that we are beginning to understand. We've been doing a lot of research. Dr. Lydia, she has been doing a lot of research, and he has been, she made a PhD. She was 5 years doing a PhD. And then we put the whole thing together in a book that is called Sacred Location, The Power of Sacred Location. And to try to understand, what are these devices? Because you can think, it was just for adoration. They were doing temples to pray for their gods and things like that. But it's not only true that they were used as places for adoration. They were used as places where you would go there to feel something that is a higher level of highly organized electromagnetic field that it's channeled, let's say, it's amplified by this resonance cavity. And by resonance cavity, imagine a temple being more like a bell. You know, like if you have a bell and you ring it, it will keep resonating, it will produce a sound. So imagine something similar with a temple. Of course, you see it and you don't see it as a bell. It's not hollow. But many temples are built in something that it's called, and I will give another very important concept, that something that is called a biological capacitor. A capacitor, in terms of electronics, a capacitor is a device that is made with different layers of insulator and conductor. And different devices are made like that. If you see all our mobile phones, our devices, electronic devices, laptops, computers, they all have capacitors. And capacitors are like a battery that will accumulate and store energy, and then it will release it. And these capacitors are made with different layers of insulator and then conductant, and insulator and conductant. They're made like that. They're built like that. Well, interestingly enough, a lot of ancient temples are made like capacitors in terms of the type of stone they were using. So they were using a type of stone that was an insulator, and then they were using another layer of stone that was a conductor. So for example, they were alternating limestone with granite. Limestone is an insulator, and then granite is a conductor. And they were doing that over and over and over and over. So why would you even do that? There is no need to do that. If you want to build something, you will just build with the same material. But they were doing that. And actually in Tenochtitlan, in the center of Mexico, in downtown Mexico City, now it's almost destroyed, but at that time, 500 years ago, they found the ruins of the pyramid, and the pyramid was actually built like the exact way that I'm telling you. It was built a pyramid, and then space, like 2 meter space, and then another pyramid, and then another space, and then another pyramid. So they were embedding different sizes of pyramids inside the same pyramid. Why should they even do that? They were doing that because they were creating a capacitor. They were creating a device that was storing or accumulating electromagnetic energy. That's what they were doing. So it's a very complex subject. There are different functions of temples. Lydia will talk about that. And it's a complex subject of why temples were designed like that. But temples were made to enhance all this energy, fractality, all this coherence of electromagnetic energy.
That is fascinating. A pyramid within another pyramid within another pyramid. I knew you answered a good question there for me, because I've always wondered why they use different stones, because I know that some of them will have even like basalt, andesite, really hard rocks, and then you will still see some limestone as well. And then it was like, but why, But now is for the capacitor function. So why is symmetry so deeply linked to the regulation of the human psyche?
Symmetry is important, but it's not as important as fractality. Because whenever you see something symmetrical, like some people think about sacred geometry and they will think about a mandala. And a mandala is like these shapes or these geometrical shapes that they are concentric usually, but they're symmetrical. Well, there is nothing symmetrical in the universe. Nothing. Like if you take your, one part of your face and the other part, they're not the same. We're not symmetrical.
True.
We tend to symmetry. We have two arms, 2 legs, etc. But we tend to symmetry, but we're not symmetrical. When you go to the detail, you will never find symmetry. You will find fractality. You will find a pattern that repeats inside over and over and over again. But you will not find symmetry. Whenever I have done, like different projects, and sometimes, different also architects. We have consulted architects and engineers, and they come with this idea like, oh, I did this sacred geometry floor plan on the facade, and it's perfect symmetry. And I tell them, okay, it's very good. It looks nice, but that's not sacred geometry. By definition, sacred geometry must not be symmetrical. Because if you take any plant, any animal, any tree, anything that exists in nature, any rock, it's not symmetrical. If you split it in two, one part is not the same as the other part, ever. But they are fractal. They're fractal. So the most important concept is fractality, not symmetry.
That's fascinating, because I always tended to think that sacred geometry was actually symmetrical, because you would think that because it repeats itself, that it would have to follow some sort of symmetrical design. But the way you explain it makes sense, where there are no straight lines in nature, and nothing, even your face, is not the exact same when you flip it. If you say figuratively cut it in half and try to put the two halves next to one another, they're not perfect. So, okay, fractality, very interesting. So, how would cities change if architecture was designed for consciousness instead of efficiency?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. How would cities change if architecture was designed for consciousness instead of efficiency?
Yeah, they will be completely different, and they will be designed in a master plan that will mimic nature. Usually cities, the vast majority of cities, modern cities, they have no design. They just happen. Actually, they are very chaotic. Like they just randomly happen. The vast majority of cities, they're random chaos. Some ancient cities, they have some design. In the master plan, the urbanism, the whole master plan of the city, some ancient cities, they have design. You can actually see that, of course, all cities, they begun with a center, and the center usually is a spring. Why? Because otherwise people cannot live there. So you either have a river, or you have a spring, or you have a source of water. Otherwise, there is no city. So the vast majorities of cities all around the world, they begun like that, with a spring, with a source of water or a lake, and from there, civilization and the city began to be built. But the vast majority of cities are just chaos. They just randomly happen. So if you have to design a city from scratch, I will do first of all electromagnetic and telluric map. I will map what's happening in the invisible world, what's happening in the underground rivers, if there are some underground rivers, if there may be some fault lines, what's happening underground. And then from there, let's place the best things of the city in the proper locations. For example, you should never put a house over a fault line. And if you know where are the fault lines, so you will say, okay, here we will not put houses, we'll put other things, parks or whatever. So the whole design, I will do it since the beginning, like a master plan, in terms of a master plan, urban, big master plan, taking into considerations all these invisible things, like everything that is underground, and then use a lot of fractals, like just observe our body. All the veins and the arteries that are close to our heart, they're bigger. And then eventually when you end up, in the micro veins that are in our fingers, they're smaller. Why? Because you need less traffic, let's say, less nutrients have to reach them. So it's the same thing for cities. You need a very big, road, but then eventually you don't need that road to continue all the way. So it has to be planned the same way nature plans bodies, the same way.
Very interesting. So let's talk about a little bit about where you see the future and some evolution and stuff. So is architecture being used unconsciously as a form of control?
Yes. Yes, totally. Completely.
So
I just think about the boxes. They literally say, people that live in their own box. When you cannot
very good
change.
connection. Very
When
good
you
connection. I
cannot
didn't think
change-
of it like that. Wow.
Huh?
I didn't even think about it like that. You living in a box. Oh gosh, you just connected a lot.
Exactly. So people say, this guy is very stubborn. He's just living in his own box. He doesn't want to change his ideas. Well, guess what? Almost everybody in this planet is living in a box. So I think it's done by design. I think it's done on purpose. And people are just not aware that you can break the box. You can have other geometries. You can live in a pentagon. You can live in an hexagon. You can live in other geometries. Like if you see African tribes, I'm talking about indigenous African tribes, they live usually in very simple huts, but they're almost always circular or round shapes. They live in round shapes. And if not, they will live in spiral. And they will make their houses very organic, and they will go with whatever nature is telling them what to do. And now, thanks God, there is a fashion to start using organic shapes and organic materials and natural materials. There is a fashion, begun in Tulum and in Bali and all these posh areas around the world, but they're starting to use through fashion more organic things. They're starting to use bamboo as a structural material. And you can see also these new cities that are built in Dubai, for example. I don't like Dubai. It's all artificial. It's all skyscrapers. It's all but they're using some sacred geometry. In the facades, they're using sacred geometry. In their master plan, they're using sacred geometry and fractal geometry. So it has both things. But the concept is the same. The concept is just boxes and boxes and boxes. So what I think is that it is designed. It is designed to keep you literally living in a box, because like that, your electromagnetic field, your emotions, your thoughts cannot change because they resonate with the place that you're in.
That just blew my head because, we talk about, say, for example, media, or you talk about, what's politics, you talk about the education system, but no one thinks about where we live and that our houses are a form of control as well in terms of limiting consciousness. So what would a truly healing city look like?
Ooh. We have some beautiful projects. It's not a city. It's a crypto hemp-based community where we design 4 hectares. And you can see it in the projects in our website, but it's all, spirals, and it's all, we're not using any straight line. It's all organic shapes, the same way nature does. So that's how it would look like. You need, maybe for some things in terms of structural engineer, you need straight lines. You can combine them both, but it doesn't need to be 100% everything straight line. You can use some straight lines if it's very, very necessary. You can also use, instead of having a lot of houses, 1, 2 levels, and then there is no empty space, you can put all those houses in a tall building if the tall building is not designed as a Faraday cage, and then you have empty spaces where you can, use them for rainwater collection. You can use it for permaculture. You can use it for so many things, really so many things. But the way I envision a city is created through fractals like fractal geometry, natural fractal geometry. And the materials, if it's needed, and you have to use, let's say for seismic reasons, you have to use concrete, you use it only for the structure, and everything else is natural materials. And you have to take into consideration the place that you are putting your city. Like you have to take into consideration the bioclimatic aspect of the city. Because, where is the sun coming? Where is the east? Where is the west? Where is the south? Like simple things. Now we have seen in many houses, it's not considered. So what they do is that it doesn't matter if your house is in Hawaii or it's in Dubai or if it's in Indonesia, doesn't matter. They just repeat the same thing in different places. And it has nothing to do. And what they do is that, okay, we solve it with AC, we solve it, they just solve the problem. But they're not conscious enough to, since the beginning, design it, taking into consideration all these elements.
Well, like we say in Barbados, follow pattern, and that's basically what we're doing. We're just following what everyone else is doing and just not even have any concept that it's not necessarily the right thing to do. So, could conscious architecture accelerate human evolution?
Say that again?
Could conscious architecture accelerate human evolution? The evolution of consciousness?
Yes, completely. Completely, because then you open for different geometries, you open for different emotions, you open for different ways of feeling, ways of thinking, and our consciousness change. If you go to nature, if you hike in nature, you will see how your consciousness change immediately. You're other human being. People that are sick, they're like depressed or whatever in their house, in their Faraday cage, in their little box. And then you tell them, okay, get out, go to nature, go start hiking. In 1 to 2 weeks, they have forgotten their problems. Because we are nature. We need to be connected to nature. Like I'm talking about any nature. It can be the desert, the jungle, wherever you're living, the forest, whatever you are. Just go to nature.
I find that when I'm on holiday, I do a lot of grounding because we have dogs in Barbados, and I would play with them barefoot and stuff, and that really helps a lot in terms of just feeling better, getting rid of stress and getting out negative emotions and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that we don't even consider nature in designing of houses, cities, just urban development at all. Is just about to get the best looking structure, I guess, and in some cases not even the best looking structure, it's just to cram as many people in for economics, So why do you think then that mainstream architecture resists these ideas?
Mainstream architecture exists?
Resists these ideas that you're sharing today?
Yeah, for profit. They resist it because of profit, mainly. They put profit over anything else. And they want to make, using concrete, because we have seen it. We have lived it a lot with clients, and also with, even politicians. We have given them talks, and we have shared all this information with them. And they say, yes, but the concrete company will give me whatever percentage if I propose that everything is made in concrete. It's a lot of corruption. It's corruption. The highest level of corruption that exists in this planet, one of the highest, is in building. Because through building, they say that they're going to do whatever amount of square meters of new highway, and they can take money from there. So it's a high level of corruption, and that's why they keep pushing everything in industrialized materials, everything, because they can use natural materials, but they don't want to.
I would have thought that by using natural materials, they could just charge more So they could still make money in theory because you just pass on the cost to the client, no? So they don't have to necessarily have corruption in the system if you just charge people. If the natural materials cost more, just charging people more, and you can still have, as a construction company or architectural company, your markup is still the same. So unless it's just greed, just want more.
Yeah, we have seen it over and over, unfortunately. But that's what it is.
Okay, so let's get you on this one. If humanity is entering a new phase of awareness, what role will space design play?
Can you rephrase it? I didn't understand this.
Sure. So if humanity is entering a new phase of awareness, what role will designing of spaces in a more conscious way play in the evolution of our consciousness and, our ascension and all that kind of stuff?
Okay. Well, what's happening is that through internet and through social media, we as humanity, we are having a faster feedback loop. That's what's happening. So in the past, for an idea to actually reach whatever amount of people, you need to write a book. The book needs to be approved by whoever, and then it has to be published. And then you have to go and buy it. And then after maybe 1, 2, 3 years, that idea will reach, eventually enough people to be aware of it. The same thing is happening now, just extreme speed with social media and with the internet. So any idea anywhere in the world, it's the feedback. What in the past was 2, 3, 4 years, now it's through 3, 4 minutes or weeks. It's extremely fast. And in the past that you have some people producing content, now you have whoever, any person in the planet can produce any content. So the amount of information and the feedback, the speed of that feedback is far higher. So that's what I think is happening. It's happening in our planet, and it will just continue to accelerate. And very soon with robots and, all this AI and all these things that will happen, people will have to decide. You either live in a more artificial and more robotic life, or you live in a more natural, in a more organic life. At some point, the division will be pretty clear. So either you're using technology or technology is using you. So all these types of addictions that we have seen, in social media and etc., like it's the same thing. You're using technology to express a message, or technology is literally using.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I'm seeing that the internet now has changed things dramatically in terms of this feedback loop system for both good and bad, because you find now that alternative ideas now are popping up. And while there's a lot of suppression of those ideas, basically because people are curious and starting to something that just doesn't feel right in them, they're getting a lot of shares and stuff. So I think the genie's out the box. I think the and the box that you were talking about, I think the box is broken. I think that we've just not realized that the box is broken, because even a conversation like this, because I heard you on Matthew LaCroix's channel. I've listened to him for a while, and he normally talks about ancient hidden history and the Anunnaki and stuff like that. And then here you are on my show now. So this is a confirmation of exactly what you're saying. Those ideas or feedback loop is much faster, than before. So yeah. So with that said, Arturo, I would like to thank you for being a guest on the Conscious Man 7. It was a very interesting conversation. I've learned quite a bit as well, because as a civil engineer, you really made me think back when I was on construction sites, and then you add a lot of context to some of the other things that I know, practicality and not symmetry. stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy listening back to this conversation.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you and to share as much as we can. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, mate. You're very welcome. So guys, we can take a very quick break here to say, if this conversation is opening your eyes, pause for a moment. Share this episode with someone whose health or well-being matters to you. This is knowledge most people never encounter. If you are listening to this episode on one of the podcast platforms like Spreaker, Spotify, or Apple, like this episode, leave a comment with your biggest takeaway so far, and give us a 5-star rating, as that helps this show to be visible to more people. Follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246 and at the Conscious Man 7 podcast, or Todd Cave on Facebook to see what we get up to during the week and see how I merge fitness, consciousness, and spirituality to help people not only get into the best shape of their lives, but also level up in other areas of their life. Also, check out the sponsor of our show, The Kembo, at thekembo.com to get yourself some orgonite pyramids, tower busters, and jewelry which create orgone energy, which is the life source energy and neutralizes the nasty EMF waves that we are constantly bombarded with. Use coupon code CM7 to get 10% off your order. Now we're going to be talking to Lydia, who is the other founder of Geophilia. Hello, Lydia. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Todd. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I had already spoken to Arturo and that was such an awesome conversation. So I'm really keen to hear from you and, you know, your origin and stuff like that. So you've spoken about growing up surrounded by ancient Greek sites. And how did those environments shape your early understanding of space and healing?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm originally from Greece. I lived there most of my life. And that definitely impacted me because there is such an abundance of temples, like everywhere you travel. And, you know, I used to travel a lot growing up also with my parents or with school or with, you know, just friends. And literally anywhere you go, there are temples. So for me, it was just like an enigma because I was looking at those temples and I was always wondering, why this location and not another? Why this geometry? Why these materials? So there were all these curious questions. And I always felt there is more to them than what we're being told at school, what we're being told, you know, from mainstream archaeology and also even architecturally speaking. I was always fascinated by architecture. Since I was very young, I knew I wanted to be an architect. But with these temples, it was always something more enigmatic to me. I just had a lot of questions. And then I definitely had a very special experience that really, it left a blueprint on me, which is I was 18. I had just entered architecture school, so I was in the first year. And at that time, I hadn't yet started my spiritual awakening, which started around 21. So I was in the pretty mainstream world, you know, a lot of science. I was a lot into quantum physics and string theory and just a lot of that. So that's important for people to understand. My experience was not, you know, imposed on myself in a way. So I had the immense honor to get inside the Parthenon with the architecture school because the professor of history of architecture in National University of Athens, where I studied architecture, was and still is the main manager, let's say, of the restoration of the Parthenon. So we had this access and we could enter inside the temple, which no one has access to do that. And so I still remember that as if it was yesterday. And when I walked the few stairs that are in the contour of the temple, and then you enter with the colonnade, and then you enter the inner sanctum, I just felt literally that I crossed a threshold. I still remember that feeling. And I just looked around and it felt like I'm in a different dimension or something like that. And I was not at all in the spiritual world at that time. So I was really stunned and I was trying to understand what is going on with this experience. I didn't have any explanation for it at that time, but it literally felt that I crossed after I went through the stairs of the contour, and it was a different reality. So I was just looking around and just feeling so intense energy, let's say, of something, which, many years later, I got to research and explore, and it ended for me doing a PhD on the ancient temples, their technology, and teaching all about it. So it's really a very fascinating subject for me. And that's a little bit about, I think, how it started.
Okay, so what originally pushed you toward geobiology rather than conventional medical or biological sciences?
Yeah. So geobiology, first of all, it's maybe a word that, everybody listening, they are not very aware of the meaning. So it's actually a science that studies how our location and the geology, the local geology, for example, where our home is, can affect our health and our well-being. And also it can also, as I saw in my research, it can affect the health of plants and animals and many things. So it's something that is more universal. What started that journey for me was, on one side, I had big questions about the location of temples. So I was like, why did the ancients pick this location versus another one? I always felt that there was more to that, and it was not just a random thing like, oh, this place looks good or it has a nice view. I felt it is far more than that. And so that was the overall questions I had. But then I had a really challenging experience when I moved into a freshly built apartment, meaning it was just finished construction. And I was renting there, and I was looking for a place that has just been freshly constructed because I wanted like this neutrality in terms of energy. So there was no one using it before. But within more or less a year of being there, I started getting really sick with different symptoms. I was barely able to get out of the couch during the day. I had no energy, really bad digestive problems. And after actually 1 year, I couldn't sleep in my own bed again. So I went to my bed and I couldn't sleep. Whereas I started experimenting, and I had a really small couch in my living room. It was a small apartment. And in this couch, it was neither comfortable like a bed, or I couldn't even elongate my legs. So I had to be crunched, but I could sleep almost really good. And that stumbled me. I was like, why I cannot sleep in my bed that, I have a natural mattress and it's all good. And I've done all my, harmonic things, the things that I knew until then. And so then I did more experiments on myself, and I had a second little room, which was my meditation room. So I just put a thicker carpet on the floor, and I moved all my, my covers and everything from my bed there. So for 1 whole year, I slept on the floor because I couldn't sleep on my bed. And then I started this deep exploration of all the things that are related to health and architecture. So how, for example, the house was freshly painted, and that of gases, many things, and that was affecting me. Then there was issue with EMFs, and I had springs in my mattress of my bed, and I did measurements of body voltage. And there were many things, formaldehyde from the plywoods. So I didn't know any of these things, and I was getting very, very sick. But the issue with the sleep was because what I found later with doing research training, I went to visit, the best experts in Europe and around the world. I wanted really answers, first of all, for myself. Like, I need to know what I need to do to get healthy again, because my symptoms were getting worse and worse. So as I found out later, my bed was over an underground water stream. And so, doing measurements there, it was a very disturbed field. And so that's why I couldn't sleep there. And when there is a disturbed location, this is what we study in geobiology, or, for most people is known either as geopathic stress, or, there are other words that people use, but I like the term geophysical anomalies. That's how I like to share about it, because it's an anomaly of the field. So the field is either higher or lower in that area where the anomaly is. And the issue is maybe for a night or two or a couple of nights or a couple of weeks, the body can manage the stress. But if you do more than usually after 3 months, like over the long term, the body starts to have issues. And the reason for that is the bed is the most important because where we sleep, our body needs to really shut down to regenerate and create melatonin. And, there are processes that are healing in the body. There are anti-cancer. There are many things. So when there is a kind of stress, like a geopathic stress or an EMF or other things, the body cannot shut down fully. Maybe shuts down 70% or 50% because it's still trying to push away the stress of whatever. And so that causes slowly long-term diseases. And as I saw in my PhD, which was exactly that, the title was Geophysical Anomalies and Their Effect on the Biosphere. So the health of people, animals, and plants. I researched all of that. And so what I saw, for example, for human biology, it can create, there are 3 main issues for most people. So it's either cancers, it's either autoimmune or cardiovascular. So these 3 things are greatly affected when we sleep over an anomaly. And so that's something really important for people to know. And I had to learn the hard way, and of course, it's like a very challenging time and also a blessing that led me to all this exploration and eventually, teaching and sharing all about it and incorporating it also in all the architectural design we do.
So, okay, did you end up studying a PhD in all of this simply because of what you were going through, or it just aligned that you had an interest in it and then you were in that flat that was like that?
Yes, I already had an interest in it, and also behind that was the location of ancient temples, because the ancient temples are located on anomalies because they use that for their technology. They use it as a power source. And so I always like to say that to people because clients ask me many times, like, Lydia, should I design my home like a temple? And my reply is no. You have to do exactly the opposite. So a temple is meant for healing, for alter states, for all the other things that I was decoding, which is also part of my PhD. So I already had the interest on, why temples are located there and not somewhere else. And then I had the interest of, why people maybe get sick if they sleep in a bad location. And then I had my own experience. So I think it was like a mixture of all that. Definitely the experience of going through this challenge gave me the kick of, I need to really go very deeply in this.
Okay, so at what point then did you realize that land and geometry were influencing health more than most people are willing to admit?
Well, my experience in that apartment was a catalyst. I already knew because I was always interested, since I was in architecture school, actually, I was always interested in how spaces can affect us, positively or negatively. And I didn't have any specific thing in mind. Yes, I was a bit interested, let's say, in the form, like, do different forms or geometries can affect us differently or, positively or negatively? Why one space feels better? Maybe I go to another space and I don't feel well. I am very sensitive with spaces. And again, this is, and a blessing and a curse at the same time, because it allows me to have a sensitivity and design spaces, well, in terms of understanding what is needed. But also if I go to places that are pretty heavy, I get very, very affected and I need to do a lot of work to recuperate from that. But, having that experience in that apartment also didn't have a good geometry. That wasn't, there were many issues, I was just uncovering one layer and then another layer, the location, the EMF, the formaldehyde in the plywood, the VOCs in the paint, the off-gassing of all the new materials. If it's a house that is built 10, 15 years ago, you don't have that off-gassing anymore. It's done. But the first few months, and especially the first few years, it's at the peak of everything. So you get intoxicated. Unfortunately, with the new materials we have, because if we did that 100 years ago, there was no toxic materials. That's a new thing in architecture and construction. And unfortunately, these new materials that are, pressed plywood and all these things, they have made the natural materials far more expensive. So then, the contractors and even clients say, oh, I'll just go for the plywood because the natural wood is too expensive for me. I cannot afford it. And so there is all this difficulty with just choosing natural materials that we are meant to be surrounded with.
Okay, I see. I didn't realize that houses used to gas like that for several years. So it should almost be a thing where you build a house, but you leave it vacant for a while for health purposes before you move in, or find some way to counteract the gassing.
There is.
To make it feasible. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about geophilia. You describe geophilia as the love of Earth. So when someone lives in harmony with their environment, what do you actually see change first? Is it their nervous system, their energy levels, or their health symptoms?
That's a very good question. I think that can vary according to each person. And I have seen in my life many people that we all have different sensitivities. So some people are greatly affected in their psychology and their nervous system, as you said. Some other people get their sleep affected negatively by a space, or some other people develop a lot of physical issues like, cough and respiratory and whatever else. So it depends on the person and their sensitivities. So I cannot say per se what first gets, changed. But I would definitely say that being surrounded by harmonic field of a house that has sacred geometry, has natural materials, has taken into consideration all of these parameters, knows how to counterbalance, off-gassing, if there is one, for example, it definitely allows the body to go very fast into coherence and find its harmonic balance internally. So wherever the body has gone into imbalance, it brings that back, far easier, because this is all epigenetics, the work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, which I really love. And this book changed my life the first time I read it. And I realized that this is exactly, and I had the honor to talk to him in one of his seminars about my PhD. And I said, listen, your discovery is that we put the cells in a different liquid environment and the cell changes completely. So when we put people, which, we are made of some trillion cells, in a different liquid, which is the energy fields that we are surrounded, and the energy fields that we are surrounded are a mixture of the physical materials, the geometry, the EMF, the location, all of that creates a field. And if this field is very disharmonic, then that epigenetically affects the cells and the DNA and turns on and off different genes. So a disharmonic environment, unfortunately, will turn on genes that are, for cancer, for autoimmunity, for stress, for, adrenal exhaustion, things like that, because the body's constantly trying to manage whatever is going on in the space. And adding to that all the other things that we have in life to manage, our daily life, our routine, our work, our family, all of these things. So, imagine that you are literally placed in a harmonic field, 360 degrees. And so your cells are completely covered in this cocoon of harmonics. And we really experienced that a lot with Arturo in 2020 with this craziness that happened. And we have here where we're recording right now. We are in our house in Mexico, which we designed and built. It's all natural with sacred geometry and all the things that we do. We are in the forest of grit. And so we literally felt like in a cocoon of protection. And when we went out, people in this craziness with whatever was going on and fear and all this craziness. And when we came back here, it was like all of that had disappeared. And we could go back to our own, own balance and our harmony very easily.
Okay, you really encapsulate why they say when you change your environment that you feel better by default because of the epigenetics, the cells turning on and off and all that kind of stuff. Because I always knew that it made a difference, but I couldn't put in words why. So I think you've answered that question for so many people, why like going to the beach would help with stress and all that kind of stuff, you know? So, okay, I'm definitely going to re-listen to that.
Yeah, the beach is a great example that you're mentioning. Why? For example, you get grounded, electromagnetically you get grounded, and we can replicate that in a home with special ways and devices to get grounded. You get negative ions from the water that is moving. Again, that we can replicate in a home and have negative ions in our space. We have natural light and sunlight. That's also super important. I know this is like the basics, but it's like we have forgotten the basics today. So I see so many people, you know, feeling depressed and not feeling well. And then they spend all their day in an office, you know, that barely has any window. So if you get so detached from your natural source of energy, which is the sun, you know, forget about anything else. Like we need big windows. We need natural light. That's crucial for many things. So the beach is a great place, and we immediately get distressed because there are so many things going on. And some of them we can replicate in our spaces.
Okay. So before illness becomes obvious, how does geopathic stress usually make itself known in the body or psyche? And why do most people ignore those signals?
Yeah, you know, it's because these signals cannot be kind of analyzed by our conventional medical system. It's not that you would go to a doctor and you start saying some symptoms. I will share a few that are typical. Of course, they vary a lot, but there are some that are typical. And the doctor will just run blood work and things like that, and they will not find anything. And so they will say, oh, it's in your mind. You know, you're okay. You're just stressed, you know, or whatever. Or take that pill, you know, to whatever. So we don't have a system to support all that. But I will definitely say a very crucial symptom for many people is bad sleep or no sleep. You know, you cannot fall asleep. And then you see that if you change your location, like maybe you go on holidays and you see like, oh, I can sleep great. Or you go to a friend's place, or you go on a trip, even for work, but you just sleep somewhere else and you're like, oh, I could sleep so well here. You know, something is going on. So sleep is definitely a very, very popular symptom with geopathic stress. And of course, that leads to adrenal exhaustion. So if your body doesn't rest well, you know, then the adrenals just go into full cortisol mode, and then there is exhaustion. So there can be, even for people that maybe fall asleep and they stay asleep during the night, but the sleep is not this restorative deep sleep. They don't realize it, and then they feel exhausted. So their energy levels go down. You know, that can also lead to either feelings of depression or stress or panic because the body is in a constant alert. So these are very typical symptoms in the beginning. You know, usually the other symptoms, of course, like the autoimmune and the cardiovascular, they need to be built up for most people in a long term. It's not like a couple of months. Usually, unless the body's overloaded, you know, with other things. So it just kicks in everything else.
Okay, I see. Now, why do you believe modern healthcare ignores environmental and spatial causes of illness?
That's such a good question. Well, I'm wondering the same myself, but as much as I have a lot of gratitude and respect for our modern system of medicine, which can save lives, you know, in an accident and in acute situations that, you know, there is nothing else we can do. Apart from that, modern medicine does not heal any situation chronically. It doesn't have the support for that. It's just made to cover symptoms. So, oh, you have a symptom, take the pill. But who cares what is the root cause? So modern medicine doesn't look into the root cause. And the root cause, usually, it's a couple of things, and it's a complex. So that's why I think people like in the normal medical system, they say, oh, we don't know what causes cancer. Of course we know what causes cancer. And in every person, it's a combination of things. It's emotional, it's spiritual, it's EMF, it's mobile phones, it's Wi-Fi, you know, it's issues with your relationship and your family maybe. It's bad food, bad air, bad water, you know, and there is a long list of that. And for some person is 10 of that, for another is 7 of that. And it varies in every person because we also have different sensitivities. That's why you put people to work in a toxic environment of, I don't know, a paint factory, and some people develop, cancer in their lungs, and some other people no, because they have different tolerance. And that's why you will put maybe 100 people on a geophysical anomaly, and maybe, I don't know, I cannot foresee a number, but maybe, 70%, they can develop symptoms, but then the rest will not, because they have a different tolerance for that kind of stress. And so, unfortunately, our system is, I'm trying to say it as soft as I can, it's a system to make money, unfortunately, over keeping people sick on the loop, you take that pill, and then that pill creates a side effect, and then you're back and you have to have another pill for the other symptom that made, it was a side effect of the first pill. And it's just a constant loop of, just buy from me more drugs, more pills forever and ever and ever. Because imagine if we have healthy population, governments don't want healthy people. Healthy people, they think, they will, rebel. They will see what is wrong with the system. They will just react completely different. You cannot control healthy people. So, the system wants people sick, depressed, and stressed, which is what is going on for the majority of people in the world. And it's so sad to see it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the medical industry views us, or the pharmaceutical companies, I should say, view us as customers. In order to make money as a business, you have to have customers. So if you have customers, then how do you keep your customers? You keep them sick. So basically that confirms what you're saying, because I see it as a business model. As an entrepreneur, business works off of customers. So the only way to retain customers is to keep them sick. So you feed them all of the stuff that you mentioned above, So let's shift gears to sacred geometry and biology. What happens biologically when a human body is exposed to coherent geometric forms?
Yeah, that's a nice subject. So basically, everything in the universe is designed by the universe, by, the cosmic intelligence, whatever you want to call it, is designed based on harmonic geometric patterns. And that's the language of the universe. The universe doesn't speak any other language. It speaks geometry and frequency and proportion, which is the same thing. And so whether you look at the very, very small scale in the quantum world, you see sacred geometry, and that's all the work of Nassim Haramein, who, he's an amazing researcher. We have been collaborating for years on the temple research. And he discovered, the geometry of time-space, or ether, and it's all sacred geometry. And then you go to the very, very big scale, the cosmic scale, and then we have, galaxies and things like that, and the same principles apply of sacred geometry. And then you come in the middle scale, the mesocosm, and, we have the human body, and we have, nature or anything in our planet. And we find golden ratio, and we find all these sacred geometry proportions. Our body is built on that. Our DNA is built on, 5-sided geometry based on golden ratio, and then 6-sided geometry, which is based on the flower of life, which is the geometry of time-space. So literally our own DNA, is exactly built with sacred geometry. So we are meant to be surrounded by these fields because this is our nature. This is not, spiritual philosophies or, new age ideas. This is just really science of today, which we have now understood that sacred geometry is not sacred, not only, in terms of, esotericism and spirituality, which, I love both, and the, all the scientific world and all the spiritual world. But today we know that it's sacred because it comes from the intelligence of the universe. Like literally, this is the way the universe designs in all scales. If you have a cosmic architect out there, designing all the different scales, it's based on that. And so when we bring all that wisdom and science into our modern spaces, we just replicate what's already there and we create that alignment and we bring back our bodies to a field of whatever is meant to be for our nature. It's as simple as that. We just copy nature and the universe, basically. That's what it is.
Okay, so everything is based on sacred geometry and mathematics, which is really harmonics. And that's quite interesting. I didn't realize that you said time and space is based on the six.
Yes. That's all the work of Nassim Haramein. You know, he discovered that, and he based it also on the work of Buckminster Fuller, who was an amazing geometer, genius, architect, you know, so many things. He discovered that geometry, which is called the cube octahedron, which is based on a six-sided geometry. And so Nassim, you know, used that, and he discovered that this is the geometry of time-space. Literally, if you go deep, 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 and you zoom in, you know, millions of times, you will find that structure. It's a structure which is created like a field, and that's a field that breathes, and that field is what creates matter.
Wow, very interesting. Now, you've presented research showing geometry affecting plant growth. Why is that relevant to human healing?
Yeah, that's a great subject that we are always very passionate about. For example, we did that project, and we've done several, but this project, for example, that we did in Greece, it's the biggest organic agriculture, let's say, agriculture. He creates products out of whatever he farms, you know, with really heirloom seeds. And he called us to do the best that we can do in a new extension of his factory, that he was going to keep his seeds and his products there. And so in this project, we couldn't even influence the design or the walls. That was already, you know, prefab, whatever. The only thing we could do is affect the floor. So what we did is we made these sacred geometry grids, and we added like a special powder with crystals, which has like all this patented technology. And then next year, he sent us pictures that are in our website, if you guys want to check it, because sometimes visuals are amazing. And he kept his seeds, the same seeds. He kept them in his old factory and in the new area that we worked on the floor. And he placed those seeds to grow in the same land. And you see that the seeds that were stored over the geometry, they grew like 3 times more. The results are fascinating. Yes. And that has been replicated many times with coherent fields. You know, you put a seed to grow in a sacred geometry house versus a typical construction. And many times in a typical construction, it won't even grow, or, you know, it will grow very slowly. Whereas in a sacred geometry house, you know, it will just grow and have a very strong, like really good health and strong plant, and it will also give far more harvest.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. And guys, you got to check out the photos on the website as well.
There's the main page of Geophilia. In the bottom, if you scroll down, you will see the pictures.
Yeah, that's amazing, because we know that frequency changes the patterns in water, but then no sacred geometry for seeds. So then how does that affect human healing, the sacred geometry, since it affected plant growth?
If you think about it, you know, in terms of, very simple, in terms of water, we know that sacred geometry structures water. And in simple terms, for, you know, people have never heard that before, water that comes from your tap, I mean, please don't drink tap water ever. Anyway, long story.
Please.
That's another seminar, but go and get spring water, or get, you know, filter, or become a filter. That's it. It's so simple. But tap water, you know, it's garbage water, unfortunately. But, for example, if you pass normal water, and you check its molecular structure, it has chaotic molecules, literally. And then you pass it through a 3D vortex, and we have a technology which we use for that. You can also check it in our website if you want, but there is a technology with golden spirals. And so when water goes through that geometry and you check again the molecular structure, you will see that after the geometrical arrangement, it gets into a perfect hexagonal grid. So the molecules just get themselves perfectly organized. And so if you think that in terms of our bodies being 70% water, you have it. You don't need to go into crazy science. It's just you get all the water of your body highly structured, and from there, your cells get more hydrated. The communication, is far better through the geometrical structure, and so on and so forth. And so that's one easy way to see it. But of course, talking about the seeds, we have the same thing in our body. So if you put cells, over these geometries, then the cells will be far healthier and they will have a better lifetime. They will be stronger. The same way the seeds grow into stronger plants that also give more fruit. So experiments with plants are great to see that because it's very visual. You can see directly.
Okay, so with that being said, can sacred geometry influence the nervous system or hormonal regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. I did mention before that, for example, bad sleep or non-restorative deep sleep will create adrenal stress or adrenal exhaustion. And so the adrenals are the ones responsible for the hormone production. So if the adrenals are already in a bad situation, guess what? All your hormonal system will go into a complete wreck. I am not obviously I'm not, I don't have a medical background per se, but I know a lot about health and well-being because I have struggled a lot. And I can tell you from all the things I've learned from the best experts that I've trained with, the hormonal system is probably the number one, that actually will affect everything else. So if there are hormonal issues, that can have just a domino effect in everything else. And I didn't know, but for example, the sexual hormones that people think are just maybe for, fertility and all these things, they're the number one thing in our body for longevity. So if you want to have a long, healthy life, you have to look into your hormonal system. And of course, that's greatly affected by things like geopathic stress. And of course, you mentioned the nervous system. Well, if your body's constantly managing a stress because your location has this anomaly and your body's trying to mitigate it all day long, or where you sleep, that definitely wreaks havoc of the nervous system. And, you will have long-term stress that gets into panic attacks, gets into, all this kind of fogginess in the brain and lack of focus on all these things. So it's just a vicious cycle of symptoms. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that in modern architecture, we really need to be very aware of and not just, we have that land, let's build everything we can and just sell it and make money. That's the way architecture is seen. Or let's make a fascinating design and, star architect level. And who cares about how all this, the location, the form, the materials we're using, how it affects people's health, we are not oriented in that yet. I'm talking about, the most percentage, because of course there are people that are looking into that, but it's a really small percentage.
Very much so. Now, where do you see fractal patterns inside the body, and what happens to regeneration and repair when those patterns are disrupted?
Okay, that's a pretty complex one. We are built on fractals. Fractality is all about the self-repetition of a pattern. So in very simple terms, you have one pattern and then you zoom in and then you see more of those patterns and then you take a little piece of that and you zoom in and you see the same thing. And so that's fractality. So in our body, we have that across many scales. So not just one scale. For example, if you go to the very, very small and you see how the cell is, the toroidal field of the cell, and then you see, for example, the blood and you have the toroid, the platelets in the toroidal shape. And then the heart has a toroidal shape. And, it's, for example, that's a toroidal fractal. And then we have all these fractal patterns in the veins, in the lungs, in the brain with the nerves. And it's like this tree-like, like these branches. And that's a very typical fractal design that the body uses, that, you see it in trees, and then you see it in lightning, and you see it in rivers when you go above, and you observe the earth. And it's this way that nature designs. And so that's really important in the universe, in the body, in nature. Why? Because that creates that continuation across scales. And that's how the different scales can communicate between them. So that's what keeps the universe together, is that glue of fractality. It's literally what keeps the scales together.
That's very fascinating. So basically, they have the same shape, but just in different scales. So this is kind of like a network that's unseen, where we have communication between cells in the environment and the universe and nature, where they have the fractality being replicated all the time. So it's almost like a network. Is that a fair way to understand it?
Yes. And I will give a simple example. So the way we can call one phone to another is because there is a morphic resonance. So the same frequency goes from one place to the other, and then there is communication. So when you have the same frequency, because remember, a pattern, a geometrical pattern, doesn't matter how big or small it is, it's the proportion that has to do with frequency. So when you have the same geometrical pattern, either bigger or smaller, the frequency is the same because the proportion is the same. So that allows communication across whatever scale because we're having the same frequency.
Okay. So let's talk about illness and healing. In your experience, how many chronic conditions are actually environmental rather than genetic?
Well, according to Bruce Lipton's research, who is a cell biologist, I don't even have that background, but he proved that 99.1, I think, % of illnesses are epigenetic, meaning your genetics will not determine your health or your disease in your life. Because what they did in several experiments is, for example, they took 2 identical rats, and by identical, I mean genetically. I think it was cloned, or I don't remember what they did, but it was identical. And they gave to one, whatever shitty food, blah, blah, blah. Both rats had the gene for diabetes. But guess what? One developed diabetes and the other didn't. And so they had exactly the same genes. But in one case, the environment of the food and whatever else triggered the expression of that diabetic gene, whereas in the other one, that gene didn't turn on. And what turned on was, genes for health and longevity. And that's what happened. And so we already know that from epigenetics that 99% of illnesses are epigenetic. And that means you don't get born with a disease, apart from this, super little 1% that it's literally genetic and cannot be changed, even though now with, Joe Dispenza's work and all the meditation and the inner work, there are even recoveries of these kind of diseases that are considered completely genetic and completely impossible to heal. So, that's a whole other subject. But in terms of environment, it's the main thing. And what is your environment? Your environment is what you eat, what you drink. The quality of the water you drink is one of the most important things that you can do for your health and well-being. It's your thoughts, because your thoughts determine everything in your body, from the capacity to heal, your stress levels, then your regeneration, your healing, all that. And of course, the environment where you live in and where you spend most of your time, because today we spend 90% of our times inside buildings. In the past, people used to be far more outdoors. And now, not only we spend more time indoors, but our indoors has become extremely toxic. And so all these parameters are important. And I would add to that, the quality of our relationships in our life is crucial. And that's another kind of environment. So who are the people that we have around, you know? Do they create a stressful environment for us, or do they create an environment for us to thrive? So all these are kind of environments that affect us in different ways. And also that was proven by another research that I love, which is from Dan Buettner, who did the Blue Zone research. So many years ago, he went to different places around the world to check the longevity of people. And he found 5 places in the world that have the highest longevity. And he decoded what are the parameters that are common in terms of what are people doing there differently, and they live longer and they have also better quality of life. By the way, one is in Ikaria Island in Greece, one of the 5 blue zones. And I have been there, and, you know, I understand why people live longer. And it's not just the nutrition, of course, and, you know, normal things as we discussed, the water and all basic things, but their quality of life is built on togetherness, on community, on supporting each other. And also there's no stress. So they do their things in their own time. And yes, when you go there and you're a Westerner and you go to a tavern and you want your food in 10, 15, 20 minutes, they will take an hour. And yeah, that's their time. You know, you cannot change that for them. And they don't get stressed. So there's no stress there. If you're from Ikaria, there's no stress. But coming back to what we were saying before, his research, and this is a quote I love, and I have shared it before. He has a quote that he says, your environment is the single most important thing that determines your health, your well-being, and your happiness. And that came from him, from the Blue Zone research. And of course, by environment, he means, yes, your house. He didn't like specifically go to that, but that's your environment. Also, where you live, your surroundings. You know, a city environment, for example, it's a very stressful environment for many reasons. And then who lives close to you? Who lives around you? Do you have support? Do you have deep friendships? Do you have relationships that you can count on? And that's another part of the environment. And so all these together create that multiple layer kind of bubble that we live in every day.
Okay, very interesting. Now, why do some healing spaces make people feel calm instantly while others feel drained?
Yeah, I have lived that many times in my life, and there are even spaces that I've been that I just have to immediately exit because I feel so bad. And so, yeah, I definitely have a lot of that sensitivity. And of course, there are multiple factors, but in a case that we feel like emotionally bad or drained, many times if it's a short exposure, you know, sometimes it's not so much from materials and things, but it can be an energetical imprint, like of the space or a previous owner. Like one time I remember I was called by a client and she wanted to rent a new apartment. And she asked me to go and check the apartments with her to give her some feedback in terms of holistic architecture. I remember in one of them, I felt so terrible. And I said, I really need to go. I cannot stay more here. The apartment looked good, like in the physical. And then the owner that had the apartment said that I asked her, you know, who was living here before, who was renting. And she said, oh, unfortunately, it was a guy that was very depressed. He would not even open the shutters, you know, so he would live in the dark, more or less. And at the end, he committed suicide. So, you know, that energetic and emotional imprint is there. You know, our emotions create a different electromagnetic field around us that is measurable. And the same with our thoughts and all of that. You know, if it's a long time that this person was there in this situation, that energetic field is there. And so that's also sometimes a factor that can drain us and we can feel just, you know, I need to get out immediately.
Okay. Now, what's the most controversial health insight your research has revealed?
Controversial. So one of them, I think, is that on the one hand, you know, the geophysical anomalies can make us sick if we live on them over the long term. But the same location, if you build a temple over it that has the technology to use that earth energy, is a place for healing. So that's an effect that is called hormesis. This is something that also I teach a lot in the online courses or in my book, The Power of Sacred Location. And this is a really important aspect of understanding our reality, that actually a short-term stress, something like a geophysical anomaly, can help ourselves reset, and go into healing. Whereas the same stress over the long term, it creates, long-term diseases. And it's fascinating because we cannot live in temples, that's an extreme, intense field. I mean, unless you are, I don't know, maybe an enlightened next level being or something like that, that can, work with that kind of field. But for our biology, the way we are, for most people, actually living in a temple with that intensity can actually make us sick. So when I first realized that through research, I found it very curious and contradictory, but also so true, because I think, for everybody listening, I think if you go back in your life, there could be a stressful event in your life, maybe that shook you to the ground. And from there, you just healed and rebuilt yourself in many ways. Or there was an ongoing stress for years and years, the same stress in your life that you didn't find a way to manage or change it. And that, created a sickness or a disease. And so even for emotional stressors, the same thing, it depends on the dose. The same thing can create health. The same thing can create sickness. It's all about the amount and the dosage.
That's very interesting, because I never thought of it like that, where a short exposure to the same energy can have an opposite effect to, say, a long-term exposure to it. Because what you said is true. You can get a short-term stress that shakes you out of your comfort zone and you're like, oh, okay, I need to make changes. But if you have it long-term, then gradually you can get sickness, cancer, autoimmune, XYZ. So, okay, very interesting.
There is a simple example for that. For example, one is exercise. You cannot do all day long exercise. At the end, you will not have good effects. Better for, from what the most experts say, 3 times a week, right? And you have to have rest in between so your body can go into the healing, because exercise pushes your body to build more muscle. But guess what? If you don't give your body a break from that, and you keep all day doing exercise, lifting all day weights, imagine, there is a therapeutic or a healing dose of exercise. And the same goes for fasting. So fasting has proven, to reset all the mitochondria, and, people have healed from cancers and crazy things, but it has to be for a short while. You cannot go for fasting, over the long term, because then the body breaks down, unless you're a trained breatharian. But for most of us, the rest of us, fasting has an optimal window. And even for men and women, it's different, as all the research showing now. So all these different things, there is a healing amount of herbs that you can take. And you overdo, over a long term, for some herbs, you actually lose the capacity that they have to heal, because it's oversaturated in the body. So again, that's another example that there is an optimal dose of all these things.
Okay, so let's get you on this one. If someone wanted to remove one major healing obstacle from their home, where would you tell them to start?
That's the bedroom. That's the most important place to start, because if your sleep is bad and, your body cannot regenerate at night, as we said before, then, your hormones out of balance, you're on cortisol, you're on stress, and everything else, the immune system goes down and everything just gets out of balance. And so there are many stressors and healing obstacles, as you said, in the bedroom. And we break that down for people that want to get the whole thing. We have a free PDF in geophilia.org, which is the 7 secrets to create a sleep sanctuary. And that's because also I suffered a lot from sleep problems that created a lot of issues in my life. I made this, it's free. It's a PDF, with many, many pages and so much gold. But in simple words, you need to manage the EMFs in your bedroom, turn off your Wi-Fi at night, never leave it on. There is no reason for that. Turn off the main switch of your bedroom if you can, or put an automatic switch. That's all in the PDF for if you want to read more. Make sure you use low VOC paints, natural materials, get out of the, if you have, sheets that are plastic or floors that are, carpets on your floor that have all these plastic in the back of it. Just get rid of all the synthetic materials and make sure you're sleeping on natural materials. And then there are special harmonizers that we also, it's the one that I used and actually went back to my bed. Remember, I couldn't sleep on my bed in that apartment. Well, I found a solution, which is a special bio mattress. It's a very thin mattress that goes on top of your normal mattress, and it has magnets and a special circuit around it that creates a very neutral field. So after that, I didn't change my bed. I didn't change my location because I couldn't in that house until I moved the apartment to another place. But for a while for a couple of years, I was using that bio mattress and I could sleep perfectly. So that's also on our shop if you want to check it out, and it's in the PDF. And also use in terms of aesthetics and the decoration of the bedroom needs to be super minimalistic. So we don't want visual noise because that's another kind of stress. We don't want a lot of things, or very busy paintings or very intense colors in the bedroom. We need to keep that very soft visually so the body can relax and go to sleep. So I would just mention these are the very, very, very important ones, like the foundations of having a healthy bedroom. And that's where people should start in their house for sure.
Wow, that is a lot of information there. And this was a very interesting conversation. And I certainly learned a lot. I can't wait to listen back to this conversation. So with that being said, Dr. Lydia, please tell the lovely folks at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you, any other things that you want to plug, the name of your book, and all of that great stuff.
Yeah. So geophilia.org is our website. We have everything there. Actually, there is so much free content for people to read and get informed and understand about space harmonics, what are the important pillars, how we work with the Geophilia design system. So if you're either redesigning your existing apartment or you want to build a new home, all the system is there. You can feel free to reach out for us if you have a question or you just want to communicate for a project. That's contact@geophilia.org. It's also in our website. And then we have a lot of online courses that we also teach. And one of them that I did recently, it's actually called Biohack Your Space in 5 Levels. And that's like an hour and a half of dense solutions of what you can do now in your space to create very harmonic environment, and takes into consideration everything that we talked about today, from the geopathic stress to the materials, what to do with the paints or the formaldehyde, and then energetical things to really create a very harmonic space. So that's a very dense masterclass, and it's very practical, hands-on solutions. And then regarding the temples and the location, I have my book, The Power of Sacred Location, and I have more information that is taught in the online course, which is the sacred science of ancient temples, which I really have poured my heart. It's a subject that I love so much. And that's why we bring people to temples and we do temple retreats, because the temple helps us get back into that coherence and harmony. And that's a very powerful place to be. So there is a lot more, but feel free to explore the website, and there is tons of free content for you to read and understand more of what we shared today with Todd. So
yes, guys, go over there to geophilia.org and give Lydia a shout out. Tell her that Conscious Man 7 sent you. Check out her work. It's awesome. The website is also awesome. And guys, as you know, we were talking about health today. And if you want to get into great and fantastic shape, I help spiritually inclined people burn fat and build muscle. So if you would like to start your fitness journey, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name Todd Cave on Facebook. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and let's see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army. If you are on a spiritual journey and you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. So again, hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name Todd Cave on Facebook, and let's help you on your spiritual journey. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link to the Amazon store, Todd and me, will be in the description of this podcast. Also, check out the sponsor of our show, The Kembo, at thekembo.com. Go over there and get yourself some Organite, which is the life source energy. Go over there and use the coupon code CM7 at thekembo.com and get yourself some amazing Organite, some Organite pyramids, jewelry, and all those other kind of good stuff. Also, if you would like to support us, but none of those things resonate with you, but you don't like ads because you listen to this podcast on the podcast platforms, you can become a member of our Patreon or our locals. So for just a few bucks a month, you can get direct access to me. You get early releases of all these shows, and also you get some other perks like Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff. And because I get so many messages every day, if you message me, I will get back to you much quicker than on my normal social media. Guys, if this episode stretched your mind, challenged what you thought you knew, or made you question the spaces you live in, don't let it stop there. Share this conversation with someone who's ready to think deeper, heal smarter, and see the world differently. Subscribe, leave a comment, and help these ideas move through the world. If you want to connect with Lydia and Arturo, all the links for them are in the description of this podcast. To all of the Conscious Man 7 family around the world, thank you for giving me your time today. Thank you for supporting the mission, and thank you for choosing to look inside of you to heal as it creates a ripple effect in the world. Lydia, Arturo, many thanks for being guests today on the show. This was an awesome conversation. As we say, you dropped it like it's hot, and we learned a hell of a lot today.
Thank you so much, Todd, for your lovely energy, for your invitation, and for dedication in this healing world. It was lovely to be here.
You're very welcome. This was another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, the place where we go deep beyond the veil in search of truths that they hide from you to help you reclaim your power and step into the truest version of yourself. You are the help that you've been looking for. So remember, folks, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.